I know writers who use subtext, and they're all cowards.
Right. I'm off to deal with the fate of the planet. Be gentle with them.
Oh, you know me, Mark. Kid gloves, but made from real kids.
Welcome back. Today I'm gonna put my mouth where my money is, or my money where my mouth is, whatever. Last time we discussed The Acolyte and its controversial portrayal of the Jedi. Today I want to dive deeper into what I believe are the key flaws of the Jedi and what should be focused on when you're tackling the matter of critiquing the Jedi Order in your piece of media or whatever. This is not a definitive say, just my opinion, what the problems are. First up, let's talk about the Jedi's approach to crisis management. The Jedi are often seen responding to crises, but fail to teach the prevention of such events. Their training is limited to those already within the Order, leaving the broader galaxy unequipped to handle or prevent conflicts without Jedi intervention. This reactive approach, rather than a proactive one, means that the galaxy is always on the brink of chaos, waiting for the next disaster to strike. Teaching prevention could empower more people in the galaxy to handle crises and conflicts, reducing the need for Jedi intervention. But that's not what a Jedi want. I would say the Jedi need to be needed, and of course there are a lot of problems and stories where the Jedi are not the main focus and other characters have to solve crises and problems, but for the most part I'm talking here about stories that relate to the Jedis, of course. Next, the Jedis have always had unclear standings on the matter of attachment. There were Jedis who were allowed to marry, others weren't allowed to marry, some were allowed to form relationships, others weren't, and while they preach detachment, the execution of this principle is pretty murky. Anakin Skywalker's fall is a prime example of the dangers of this ambiguity. The Order's inconsistent approach to attachment creates confusion and in some cases leads to disastrous outcomes. And then we come to my next point, which is the fear of the dark side is another significant flaw. This fear leads to extreme and preventable events such as the Jedi Padawan massacre and Palpatine manipulating the Jedi with ease throughout the Clone Wars. The inability to address the dark side healthily has caused several Jedi even to fall to the dark side, including notable figures like Oleg Kaldroma and Revan. This fear not only blinds the Jedi to the real threats, but also pushes some members towards the very darkness they seek to avoid. By demonizing the dark side without understanding or addressing it, the Jedi inadvertently create the very monsters to fear. Now, there are some Jedis who learn to overcome this flaw. For example, Yoda or Luke Skywalker or Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn all learned to overcome this and accept that there's a dark side inside of them and reconcile the light and the dark within themselves. But these events always came after a lot of tragic and hardship and loss, and and even then it's not readily taught. In the expanded universe, I believe Luke Skywalker teaches some of those elements to his students in the New Jedi Academy, but as we've seen in the sequel trilogy, I haven't seen the films, but I have enough knowledge to talk about them. Just because you don't watch something doesn't mean you cannot inform yourself about a certain piece. And I know that this fear leads to character regression in Luke Skywalker, that he unlearns multiple lessons that he should have been learned, and that's also one of the reasons why The Last Jedi Episode 8 is so controversial among the fandom. But let's get to my last point, and that is probably the most important and damning flaw about the Jedi. The Jedi's complicity with the Republic doesn't mean that it doesn't matter which Republic. This comes up practically every time when an empire is not ruling and a Jedi is working with the government, so to speak. The Jedi's complicity with the Republic often turns them into puppets. Throughout their history, the Jedi have found themselves entangled in political machinations compromising their values and missions. Whether during the Clone Wars or other significant events, the Jedi have often become instruments of the Republic's will rather than independent peacekeepers. This complicity undermines their credibility and mission, making them appear more as enforcers of the Republic agenda rather than guardians of peace and justice. The Jedi's inability to maintain autonomy from political influences has repeatedly led to their downfall, and that's why I said in my first video I can understand how some parts of the galaxy develop extreme views of the Jedi in universe, but from an outsider perspective it doesn't make sense unless you have the talent to make it sense, and I didn't feel like the Acolyte had that talent to make it. In the end, here you have it. These are the key flaws I see within the Jedi Order: their reactive approach to crises, unclear stance on attachments, fear of the dark side, and complicity with the Republic. Addressing these flaws could have changed the course of history in the Star Wars universe multiple times. The Jedi's failure to evolve and adapt to these issues ultimately contributed to the numerous downfalls. Let's get to my closing argument. People, the grim realization is this: despite the franchise's overarching message about hope, balance, and unity, the Jedi as we know them can't function in any other way than how they are presented within the universe and outside of the universe. Some Jedi will never fully adhere to their tenets, yet they remain Jedi, such as Qui-Gon Jinn or Quinlan Vos, who are not traditional Jedis in any sense, but the point still stands. After all, you can't label a duck as a frog and expect it to crack differently. The inverse is also true, and despite this, there have been many Force users who did good but couldn't be labeled as a Jedi. But the Jedi has to always follow their tenets, because that's what makes a Jedi, and if you change the rule, the saying, the tenets, they're not Jedi anymore, they're a different organization. From an outsider's perspective, their reactive nature might, or not from an outsider's perspective, what am I talking about? Their reactive nature might lack an in-universe explanation, but from an outsider perspective, it's clear why this is the case, because heroism in fiction is always responsive, otherwise it would break the story. The drama, the conflict, and the journey of the hero depend on them reacting to events rather than preventing them from happening in the first place. And these are the issues, or what makes the narrative compelling and the characters relatable. They struggle, they fail, and they rise again, embodying the very essence of heroism, and that's why the Jedi cannot change. In the end, the Jedi are not just symbols of hope and light, but also reminders of the perpetual struggle to uphold those ideals in an imperfect galaxy. Their flaws are intrinsic to their nature and to the story itself, and by understanding these flaws, we gain a deeper appreciation for the characters and the universe they inhabit. It's the eternal reoccurrence, so to speak. So while the Jedi may never be perfect, their journey and their struggle is what makes them compelling. I said that before, but I feel I have to reiterate that, because nowadays so many people are very media illiterate. For those interested in exploring these themes further, I highly recommend checking out the YouTube video The Philosophy of Kreia. It delves even deeper than I can into the complexities of the Force and offers a fascinating perspective on an age of balance. I can't tell you the name because the channel doesn't have a name. Really, just search for the video and you will find it. If you haven't made it to the end, thank you for joining me on this journey. What do you think about the Jedi and what you think are their flaws? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious.
Don't forget to subscribe. Now get the fuck out of my driveway.